All right, enough from me. We have another fantastic speaker. Podcasting is a fantastic and easy way to reach your remote workforce, but I know almost nothing about how to do it. Fortunately, we have a world expert. She's been doing this for years. She's going to walk you through how you can do this also. So Paige, we're super excited to have you. Share with us the secrets to podcasting. Paige, you're on. Paige, you have to unmute.
Oh.
You're still muted.
There we go. Okay, can you hear me now? Yay, success. Thank you so much I'm so excited to be here today. So I'm going to start with a story. I'm going to tell you about Joe Ryan of Denver, Colorado. Well, Joe went outside to check his mail one day, and as he was flipping through it, he came across a letter from the Littleton Adventist Hospital in Denver, Colorado. And he found that odd since he hadn't really been to the hospital in years. So when he opened the collection letter, he was amazed and incredulous because he had just received a bill for a colon surgery for $44,000. Now, Joe was sure there had to be some mistake, and Joe was right. Joe was the victim of medical identity theft. And since 2018, medical ID theft has happened to 27 million Americans, which is 1 in 13 patients, or almost 10% of the US population. So as cybersecurity awareness leaders, how are we going to be able to give our message to people like Joe? How are we going to spread our message to our friends, our family, and perhaps, and our coworkers? Well, we're going to use podcasts. But before we dive into podcasting, let me introduce myself. I'm Paige Ishii, and I'm the Cybersecurity Awareness Coordinator for Intermountain Healthcare. It's a nonprofit healthcare facility within the state of Utah. We have 40,000 employees and 160 facilities within the Intermountain West, including Utah, Idaho, and Colorado. Before I was in this role, I started out in IT as a night operator, and then I spent several years as a provisioning access management subject matter expert. But I also love to volunteer. So I've done lots of volunteering. I've volunteered with ISOC as a board member. I'm a current division director for Toastmasters International. But all work and no play makes me a pretty dull person. So what do I do for fun? Well, I live in Utah, and we live within a day's drive of several national parks. So we recently visited the Grand Canyon, and then I have a dog that I like to train in flyball. And so between the traveling and the trailing, I stay really busy. But enough about me. Let's dive into talking about podcasts. Okay, so why would you like to create, what is a podcast first? So in the next 30 minutes, we're going to break this talk down into 3 steps. We're going to talk about what a podcast is and why you are going to want to create one. We're going to talk about content generation, and then we're going to talk about the technology that you need to produce your own podcast. So a podcast is a series of episodes, audio episodes that are with a similar theme like cybersecurity. You subscribe and then you listen on your smartphone or on a website. A podcast can be produced for a small budget. You can turn it on or you can turn it off, and you can listen at will or on demand. For some of us, that may mean producing and making things available only on our company intranet, such as Microsoft SharePoint. But for others, that may mean hosting services designed to make our podcast available in public search engines like iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. So now that we know what a podcast is, why would you want to create a podcast? Well, podcasting allows you to reach more people. Your audience will have the power to choose, to learn passively, and to take the education with them. It's a great way to stay socially distanced, and it gives you the opportunity to engage your entire workforce. So let's take a look at who our audience is for podcasting. Well, a recent study by the Pew Research Center found that the fastest growing demographic in our workforce are millennials. Millennials have grown accustomed to consuming content on their electronic devices. And in the next 2 years, millennials will make up 50% of the workforce, and podcasts are a huge platform of this demographic. Statista.com ran a survey in June of 2020 and found that 49% of respondents aged 12 to 34 had listened to a podcast sometime in the preceding month. And while podcasting is growing rapidly with this younger age group, within the older demographic of 55 and older, it's also grown to 22% within the same time period. So it's important when you're designing and implementing your awareness program that you take everyone into consideration, because not everyone's going to play your game or read your newsletter or come to your event. People are busy. So according to Edison Research, the number of Americans who listen to a podcast each week has grown 100% over the last 4 years. There's 67 million Americans who've listened to podcasts every single month. There are 440 million blogs. There's 50 million YouTube channels, but just over 550 podcasts, which means that for every podcast, there's 800 blogs and 90 YouTube channels. Because there's less competition by doing podcasting, you're going to have an easier time finding an audience. Podcasting is not just a solution for your audience, it's highly beneficial to you as well. And it's the ultimate social distancing solution because you don't have to travel. Okay, so the National Institute of Health says that many people like to learn in a variety of ways. 33% of people learn best by reading or watching television. 26% learn by listening, and 14% learn through a touch. And many people learn through a variety of these methods. And the beauty of podcasting that it's actually content that you can be consumed while people are doing other things like commuting to work, mowing the lawn, washing dishes, or exercising. So now that I've introduced you to the concept of podcasting, we're going to dive into what it takes to the content generation, and then we're going to move into the recording and the producing and launching of a podcast. So there's many things to take into consideration when you're doing your podcast. Pat Flynn, who's a podcast A-lister and someone I would recommend that you become familiar with, has broken the podcast steps down, or the pre-launch steps down into 5 steps. So step number 1 is pick a topic. Your topic should be relevant and timely, and don't spend a lot of time talking about the technical aspects of cybersecurity. Although you and I may enjoy talking about network segmentation or the 7 layers of the OSI model, the majority of your workforce probably could care less unless you work for an IT company. So you want to grab your audience's attention, and you want to talk about like a phishing scam involving stealing grandpa's identity. Or you can talk about that Nigerian prince scam, which is an interesting fact. That Nigerian prince scam still hooks 700,000 people every year. Can you believe it? When I started podcasting, I was so fortunate. I had a retired FBI agent. And as Katie was mentioning, BEC, business email compromise, is a huge thing right now. And my FBI agent, my new team member, had a lot of experience presenting on this topic, BEC, and so I grabbed a hold of that and I asked him to do a podcast with me on business email compromise. It's still one of my favorite episodes. Other things that you can do your podcast on are two-step verification, passwords, credit card safety. The possibilities are really very endless. This is a perfect opportunity to decide if you want to script out your podcast or if you want to put it in the form of an outline. So once you've picked your topic, you can create an outline or you can put this in a storyboard. And it's perfectly all right if you decide you're going to script the whole thing out and read it. It will sound like you're reading, but practice makes perfect. And the more episodes that you do, the more natural you're going to become. At some point, you should actually just transition to doing outlines. And as you get more experience, you're just going to become much more better at this. Everybody doesn't sound very good when they first start, so don't give that even a second thought. Are you going to have guests on your podcast, or are you going to do this as an informational podcast? This is the kind of format that you're going to want to use. So an informational podcast can be very effective. I have a friend named Nate Long from St. Luke's Health who does a informational podcast called The Cyber Chronicles, and he does it in the film noir style. It's very effective. I have a lot of resources in my handout, so I'll make sure you get a copy of that because there's a link to Nate's podcast in there. So if you choose to do this freestyle and you're going to follow an outline, I'd suggest that you put the outline in the form of interview questions, and that you give your guests the questions in advance, because you want to make sure that you don't blindside them, or if there's some question that they are not comfortable talking about, they'll let you know. Plus, they'll feel a lot more comfortable and more well prepared when they get ready to do an interview with you. So the beauty of podcasting is you don't really have to be the expert. As a podcast host, you have the luxury of inviting subject matter experts to join you on your podcast, and you simply need to interview them on their area of expertise. So where do you find your experts? Well, you can ask your security staff if they'd like to do a podcast with you. Don't be surprised if they tell you no. You know, we do work in an introverted industry. So if they do tell you no, who are you going to get? You can always get industry experts. People like Katie would probably be thrilled to be on a podcast with you. I happen to use past employees, and that worked out really well. Don't allow COVID to stand in your way. You can be very successful doing podcasts by getting people to do these through interviewing software. And we'll get more into interviewing software in just a minute. So I need to bring up that if you do decide that you're going to have guests on your podcast, that you probably should get a release form, especially if they're from outside of your organization, which brings us to who's on your team. So you definitely want to have legal on your side when you start doing this. You'll want to have your security experts, and then you'll want to talk with communications and your media services. So having the support of communications is critical to your success. Well, I happen to be an avid listener of podcasts, so it just seemed natural that I would do this as part of my awareness efforts. And then when I first approached my communications consultant with this idea, he was very, very supportive. He told me who to contact to get going on recording, which was media services. He told me what software, where to get royalty-free music, and how best to approach putting this together in a storyboard. And then he also told me, don't forget about legal. Okay, next we're going to discuss scheduling. So before I jump into scheduling, I want to point out that there are many people I know who do this completely by themselves. They don't use a team of individuals. They actually do this at their home, on the side. It's their side hustle. So as I mentioned before, Nate Long is one individual. And then I have a friend, his name is Matt Christensen, and he does a series of podcasts called Fraud Not Frog, and he has guests on his, and he does a fantastic job. And you can do these for very little money. You can record and produce them for yourself, and you can have great results. So how long should you make your podcast? Well, I'd keep them brief at first. So do a 10 or 15-minute podcast on phishing or ransomware, and keep your deeper subjects like, PCI compliance for your longer episodes. Okay, now let's talk about scheduling, which is pre-launch step number 3. So you'll want to take a couple of things into consideration when you're scheduling these. Well, first, you want to take into consideration that you might want to put this on your content calendar. Next, you're going to want uninterrupted time, a dedicated space, and time of year. So you want to take all those things into consideration. Time, when will you record an interview? Well, I've heard of one podcast A-lister, John Lee Dumas, who does all of his recordings on the same day, which I think would be exhausting. So let me tell you what I do. I usually take the summer months to record my podcasts. I take the time to schedule them out, find my experts, and schedule with my media services team. I seem to have better results trying to do it during the summer, so I take any time from between May and September to get these recorded. Let's talk about space. Okay, so it's best if you come up with a designated space or a room where you can record, because I've heard of podcasters doing these in closets, their cars. When I first recorded, we had to find a storage closet, because you'd be surprised at how loud that residual noise can be. Air conditioning, barking dogs, crying babies if you're doing this at home. But the first year I did this, we found a storage room and it was full of boxes. And I asked my CISO to come and record in a storage closet full of boxes with 3 other people. It was lots of fun, I'll tell you what. So another helpful hint, since most of us are working from home right now, if you're going to record and you're going to do this at home and do remote interviewing, make sure that you're free of distractions and that you let anybody else who's in your home know that you're going to be doing this. And then you're going to want to create noise filters wherever you are that you're going to be recording, because you'll be surprised how quickly there's some extra noises going on. So you'll want to, grab blankets, pillows, hang them around your space just to help drown out some additional noises and stuff. And then time of year. Well, don't think that you're going to do all of this the week before Cybersecurity Awareness Month. You're going to have them all completed, recorded, and published so that you can start promoting those. Okay, we're going to talk about equipment now. So I'm going to change your focus really quick. So let me show you what equipment. So when we do this, this is pre-launch step number 4, and you're going to want to check with your company. Now, if your company has all of the equipment, then you've lucked out and you don't need to worry about buying any equipment. But for those of you who do need to buy equipment, we're going to take a look at what we actually need. So the first thing you need is you need a recording device. So whether that's a computer, an iPad, a smartphone, you can do all of that. But since I use a computer, that's where we're going to focus our concentrate on our efforts today. So let me show you what equipment you're going to need. The first thing I want to show you is my microphone. So microphones range in price between a low budget of $20 and a high end of several $100s. But this microphone right here is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X USB-C. It's around $100, and it's a really good, well-rounded microphone. This is the one I would suggest that you use. A lot of podcast A-listers use this kind of a microphone. This microphone comes with a mic stand, a USB cable, an XLR cable, which you don't need, because I'll tell you, we aren't going to talk about all the different kinds of broadcasting equipment. This is really very simple. You don't need a lot of things to get going, so we just need a few things, but we don't have to break the bank to do this. So let me show you what the mic stand that comes with the mic looks like. This is the mic stand that comes with your mic. It's small, it's a little flimsy, and as you can see, I have some other pieces of equipment here. I'm going to tell you what they are, and these other pieces of equipment are going to allow you to be a little bit more flexible with your recordings. So the next thing I want to show you is the boom arm. Okay, this is the boom arm right here, and it's actually attached to my table. And see how easy it is for me to move the microphone around, so then I have a lot more flexibility with it. The next thing I want to show you is called the shock mount. This is the shock mount, and this has little rubber bands around it. It helps absorb residual noise from the microphone, such as knocking into the table or if you're typing on the keyboard. Then we'll talk about this piece of fabric. This is called a windsock, and this is going to help when you're talking into the microphone with breathing. And this little piece of, this is called a pop filter. This is going to help you with the B and P words, which are the blowsives and the blowsives and plosives, which are the B and P words. They can create little popping sounds on your mic, and so it's best if you get rid of those because they can be very distracting to your listener. And then I've got a headset. The headset is additional, but is something that I like to use because then I can hear what I'm saying, and then I can also hear what's going on when I'm doing my editing. So it's additional, but it's, okay. So then I also didn't want to forget to tell you that all of this equipment that I just showed you here is around $149 off of Amazon. I've got a link in my resources that you can use. And that's basically all the equipment. You don't get caught up in all of the broadcasting equipment. You can really get, this could get very expensive for you very quickly, but really this is it. This is all the equipment, and it works fantastically. But next we're going to talk about the software that you need. Okay, what software are you going to use? Well, you're going to want recording and editing software. And what I recommend is that you use what you can get a hold of. So Macintosh has GarageBand. There is a free open source cross-platform software called Audacity. And then there's Adobe Audition. When I recorded, we used 2 microphones a computer, a mixer, the audiovisual person had a headset, and that was basically it. And then they used Adobe Audition to do all of the recording and editing. But these free software, they're great. You can use those. So then I was telling you about, doing interviewing. Well, how are you going to do your interviewing? Well, one way you're going to do that is through your interviewing software that you already have available. So whether that's WebEx, GoToMeeting, Zoom, Zoom's great, because what you can do with Zoom is if you both hit record at the same time, you'll both have your own audio files. And I'll tell you more about that when we get into the editing in just a minute. So then I wanted to tell you a couple of hints. When you get ready to record, you're going to want a good place to put your audio files. And since you're on this call, I'm going to trust that you already know how to do a file system. But let me give you a couple of hints that are really going to help you out. So think of this as like putting together a newsletter. So you have your assets and your elements. So you've got your rough draft of your newsletter articles. You've got your graphic design, your images, and all of your different documents you need to put your newsletter together. And then you call that newsletter volume 1. And you're going to do the same thing with your podcast. You're going to put everything in a folder called podcasts, and you're going to have episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. And that's how you're going to put together your file system. And I'll tell you why you need that in just a second. Now let's talk about recording. So this is important. When you get ready to record, just hit record and keep on talking. And don't worry if you make mistakes. When you make a mistake, you'll just pause for a second. And then when you go back and you listen to it and you do your editing, you'll be able to find those mistakes and you'll be able to edit those out. And this is also why you need more than one audio file to record, because you need to make sure that you have an audio file for each person speaking. You'll want one for your intro and your outro and one for your music. And if you have different recordings, then it'll be easy for you to find those mistakes and you'll be able to edit those out easily. And most of the software is really easy to use. It all works just a little bit differently, so we're not going to dive into how to use it, but it's very user-friendly software. Now, I've heard this multiple times from a lot of my podcasting friends, so just know that if you make a mistake or if anything like this happens to you, it's just par for the course. It's part of the learning process. You might forget to hit record. I had one of my friends tell me they forgot to hit record and they ended up losing a really great interview, and then it was embarrassing because they had to go back and ask the interviewee to come back. And then I had a friend who his audio file was all garbled, but his interviewee sounded great, so he had to re-record his portion. That's another reason why you want to have more than one audio file. And then you want to take out those things like coughs, sighs, or hiccups. Now, I was reviewing a training video we did with a person doing the voiceover, and he made a big, huge sigh in the middle, and so we needed to edit that out. Oh, okay, so then I was going to tell you, I was asking myself, if you don't have a mixer, how are you going to make everything sound good? And I came up with this great solution, and I hope that you'll go check it out. It's called, I found an online tool called Squadcast. And I haven't tried it myself, but I did watch the demo video, and it looks fantastic. And what it does is it allows you and the person you're interviewing it'll record everything for you, and it'll help balance out your sound. So that basically takes care of the need for a mixer. Now, I've mentioned intros and outros a few times, so let me tell you what those are. Okay, so this is the beginning and the ending of your podcast. So I'd recommend that you do these at the same time and you record them together. And so your intro is going to be your hook. It's the information that you give to your listener that draws them in and grabs their attention. Most podcasters do the same introduction. Some have scripts, some use bits and pieces, and some use parts of the podcast as their trailer to get you to listen to the podcast. Some use music. If you use music, you can actually go to Fiverr and have someone do a voiceover and an introduction for you with music for a very inexpensive fee. But you can actually just do all of this yourself. You can go to SoundCloud or Podbean and get free music there, or you can do it without music. I've done both. I've done it with music and without music. So now that we talked about the different kinds of files and what you need, let's talk about hosting. So you're going to want to sign up with a hosting service. There's several different kinds of hosting services. The most popular are Lisbon, Buzzsprout, and Blueberry. So podcast hosting offers you several services, and this is really where your audio files are going to live on the internet. So what a podcast service is going to do for you, it's actually going to create the RSS feed for you, which is the Real Simple Syndication feed, and it's going to allow you to populate your to the most popular podcast directories such as Apple, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. And this is how your podcasts are going to be found and how people are going to subscribe to them. So these hosting services also come with a lot of extra features such as stats, marketing tools. They'll actually also host a website for you, and there's additional things for you as well on there. But the most important thing is that it's a place for you to put your audio files on the internet. Now, there's other additional hosting services out there, but I would actually recommend that you start with Buzzsprout. It is really easy to use. You can open a free, you can do a free account, and they will host up to 2 hours a month for free. And it's literally, it takes like 5 minutes for you to set up an account, and then you can start uploading your podcasts right away. So I need to explain that there is a difference between a hosting website and hosting your files on a service like the ones that I've mentioned here. It's important that you know the difference, because you'll want a service like a website with an embedded media player in it to point to your audio files like Buzzsprout. Why is this important? Well, let's say you do a fantastic episode and everyone wants to download it, and they all go out to your website to do it at the same time. It's going to create issues. It's going to take up all of your bandwidth, and it may crash your website. So that's why you want to have a hosting service and a website. Okay, you can choose to publish these right away, or you can schedule them at a later date. Now, some podcasters, such as the ones that I've mentioned here before, I need to tell you about my favorite podcast. My very favorite podcast is McAfee's Hackable. They're fantastic. They do a season, they publish 1 episode a week for a series of weeks, and then you have to wait until the next season comes out. And I actually do mine this way. So I do all of them at one time, and then I publish them all at one time, and then I promote them all year long. Okay, so here is another helpful hint. Before you get ready to export these into your directories, which we're going to talk about in a second, you want to listen to them and make sure that you're happy with them and that they sound decent. If you're happy with the results, you're ready to create your files and export them to the hosting service. So from the audio editor that you've been utilizing, you're going to export these as MP3s. Now they get saved as MP4s. You'll have to change those, and each software does it a little bit differently. But the important thing to remember here is that you'll want to do them as 96 kbps kilobytes per second or 128 kbps kilobytes per second. Now, if you want your shows to show up in the different directories, you're going to need to create an account, and I'd suggest that you start with Apple iTunes. Apple iTunes is the most popular. It's been around the longest. It's the original. And in order for your shows to be discovered, you're going to add the RSS feed to Apple iTunes. Now, once you've submitted it, it will take a couple of days for them to find it, and then they'll publish it. And then I'd go ahead and add them to the other directories, such as the Stitcher, Anchor, Spotify, Pandora. I also need to make sure that you understand that you need to create an account for each one of these directories.
Hey, Paige?
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in real quick. You may not realize it, but you're already over time.
Oh,
so at some
sorry.
point you may, fantastic stuff. So if you could just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to wrap it up. So hosting is really your last step, and I'm not going to go through the metrics, so we'll just go ahead and go past that really quickly.
No. Talk about metrics for a minute or two. This is important.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Sorry. I I didn't realize it was going overtime. Okay, so we all know that metrics are important. And as I was talking about the hosting services, the hosting service will do this for you. But the other thing about metrics is that if you have to do this on your intranet site because legal hasn't given you permission to do this, you can still be successful. And you can pull the metrics off of your intranet site through the Google, through Google Analytics. Metrics are, why we do this. We have to show value for what we're doing. So I just wanted to wrap this up by telling you that, podcasting really is very easy to do. It's very easy to get going. And it's important that we find different ways to reach our community. Phishing's exploded, and we are seeing record numbers of breaches and ransomware attacks. So how are we going to be successful? Well, we're going to use podcasting. So just with a little bit of work on your part and some time and patience, you're going to be successful at recording, producing, and launching your podcasts. So thanks very much. I'm Paige Ishii. Come talk with me on Slack. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, Paige, thank you so much.